The California HVIP program, unlike some of the other grants that you've heard of, is pretty simple. It's actually requested for you by your dealer when you're ready to purchase a vehicle. So we've got a table out there. You're welcome to stop by. I also encourage everyone here just to stop by the website, californiahvip.org, and there's a vehicle catalog on there. So Lisa McGee was up here talking about that a little earlier. The vehicle catalog has videos, specs. You can look at the range and all of the different OEMs that are making these trucks. So I think that's been around the longest. We've been running for about 13 years. So we probably have one of the most robust vehicle catalogs out there if you just want to start comparing the types of trucks and buses that might be available for your use case scenario. So we're going to do this panel slightly differently. I am going to allow our panelists to introduce themselves briefly, and then our excellent host here at SCE, I'll turn the floor over to Ramiro, and he's going to walk us through a presentation about how to work with your utility and what to be thinking about along the way as you prepare. We've learned a lot of great things this morning about selecting vehicles and thinking about infrastructure. This might be getting a little bit into the weeds. We're going to get down to the brass tacks and some of this stuff and get some questions answered. So I will start with introductions. First, I'll turn it over to you, Gia Online, if you'd like to introduce yourself, your organization, and what you're working on.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be able to join you here virtually. Sorry I can't be in the room with you today. I'm Gia Vason. I'm the Deputy Director for Zero Emission Vehicle Market Development at GoBiz, which is the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. Good, we got that title done. So we work, so just to back up a little bit for those that aren't familiar with GoBiz, we're kind of the lead agency for job growth and expansion of businesses, establishment and expansion of businesses in California. So we have a lot of different units that provide support kind of across the board. Office of the Small Business Advocate. We have a permitting assistance unit. We have California Business Investment Services, which helps with incentive navigation. We have a foreign international trade and foreign investment. The iBank, Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank, sits underneath us, among some others. So as you're thinking about your business, holistically, there are probably things that we can do to help. So feel free to reach out to GoBiz, to me, or anyone at GoBiz at any time. My team, like I said, we're the ZEV Market Development Office. We work really on ensuring kind of collaboration across the agencies, making sure that we're aligned and that we have that support needed to have the many agencies that are working together to make this transition towards 100% zero emission vehicles. And we lead the development of the statewide zero emission vehicle market development strategy, and support the agencies in their annual action plans that they submit to GoBiz, kind of looking at what they're going to be focusing on each year. We also work closely with the private sector. So I'm sure many of you in the room we've worked with before. I know of listening to the other panels this morning, I know that that's true. And really trying to understand what the key challenges are and how we can support the public and private sector working together as we look to meet this transition. So we look for kind of key challenge areas, whether that's real locally, there's a particular project that's having a particular issue, or that's all the way up to what sorts of policy changes or innovations might we be able to make or think about in order to help support us moving away from fossil fuels. So I think I'll stop there, but just I guess we'll leave us with saying, please feel free to reach out now or anytime if you think there's the ways we can support you as you make this move towards a emission-free future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Gia. Next, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Brian. He's also at CalSTAR, but working on a different program. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing there.
Good morning. My name is Brian, and I work with CalSTART on the Cal Fleet Advisor program. I'm the program manager, and I help ensure that fleets in California have a place to turn when they have questions or need help transitioning to zero-emission vehicles. It's a free technical assistance service that's available to any fleet in the United States, in California. I have fleets that we're helping from 0 vehicles up to 52,000. So we help fleets of all sizes throughout the state, both public and private. We have special interest in helping those in disadvantaged communities and small fleets who may not have the resources to do this all on their own, but we can help a fleet of any size. We can help you find the right trucks, help you locate infrastructure, get you referred out to project partners that will help make this happen for you, and talk about and get you in touch with the folks at CARB for regulatory issues. We also, working at CalSTART, we have a deep integration with the HVIP program. So if you need any help finding incentives, we're here for you in that respect as well.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, that's fully funded by HVIP, so it's a complimentary service that you can take advantage of. There's lots of vendors here, and some incredible consultants that can help you really do deep dives and take a look at larger and more complex projects. But if you're just looking to get some quick answers and some connections, we'd like to be your virtual project manager or concierge service. Ramiro, I'll actually invite you up here because after you introduce yourself, you can go ahead and start your presentation.
All right, good. Thank you guys. Well, in the spirit of keeping things interactive, we'll move around a little bit. So my name is Ramiro Lepe, and I am the Senior Advisor on Southern California Edison's Charge Ready Transfer Program. And guys, I got to move around just to wake everybody up, get everybody off their phones. And guys, if you guys know me, I come from a transportation background. I've rented them, I've sold them, I've even washed them, greased a fifth wheel or two, and even changed some bumpers that mysteriously somehow stayed on. And throughout my transition, been here for a little bit over 2 years here at the utility, I always get asked a question, whether it's from my dad or somebody that I used to work with. And the question always happens to be, Ramiro, you've been there for 2.5 years. What the heck have you learned? Well, there's been a lot of things. And if I was saying today, we want to go over lessons learned. And you might hear utilities, you might hear fleets, and everybody always talk about what's the lesson learned. Today, we're going to go over my lessons learned in my 2.5 years here at Southern California Edison. And the first one I could tell you is that every EV infrastructure installation project, it's a major endeavor. There's many moving parts that go along with it. And I'm going to move over here to get my clicker. That's why I'm moving my way over here. But really, what we want to do is really uncover what those challenges are. I don't know. Should we switch it? Okay, guys, we have a technical difficulty. We're going to have Gia go first. My apologies. And then we'll transition back to me.
All right, Gia, if you're able to click through your slides, please go ahead.
All right, great. Want to make sure if you guys can stay flexible in the room there. So here we go. All right, so let's see. Let me make sure that this is working. Okay, there we go. So I already said a little bit about what our team does here, but I just stuck this in here as kind of a reminder of some of the things we do. So this agency alignment, collaboration and problem solving, business related business support. We do permitting assistance. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today in terms of sort of hydrogen fueling and charging infrastructure, permitting assistance, and then helping kind of navigate the regulatory environment. So these pictures here are a couple of the resources that we have. I mentioned the zero emission vehicle market development strategy, which is our kind of statewide approach to our transition. We also have a hydrogen station permitting and an electric vehicle charging station permitting guidebook, which if you haven't read before, I would recommend. It has a lot of great tips in there, which I won't go into today, just sort of about the whole process, where we see some key areas that you really need to be aware of, many of which have been touched on in the previous panel and the infrastructure panel. That was great. But those are a couple of resources, and we have some others as well on our website. So without further ado, this also, I just wanted to start here. This was mentioned in the last panel as well. This is CEC's beta version for their medium duty, heavy duty infrastructure dashboard. And it's great. They have many other dashboards on their website if you haven't seen them, about vehicle counts, mostly on the light duty side, vehicle counts and infrastructure that's available. And so I would recommend looking at those if you hadn't been aware of them before. But this version here, where they are taking feedback right now, it's been posted, is really going to be great. There have been a lot of questions coming up about this very thing. And so, so please take a look at that and provide feedback that you have so that we can improve it. I've been asked to talk about permitting today a little bit. And so I wanted to just share, we've heard a lot about the challenges that exist, and it is hard. Every project is different, and every project is an endeavor, like it was just stated. And I don't want it to all sound doom and gloom, right? There's a lot that's happening to try to enable this, and it's going to be a bumpy road for sure. And we're all really focused on trying to remove the barriers as they arrive. So or even anticipating them before they arrive and trying to address them ahead of time. So I wanted to share something we haven't touched much on today, which is some of the legislation that we have in place and the efforts that are underway to help streamline the permitting process and help to accelerate deployment of infrastructure. So this kind of an overview here, we have two pieces on the EV charging infrastructure side of things. We have two pieces of legislation that help with permit streamlining. So we have AB 1236, which was kind of went into effect in 2016. It requires all cities and counties to develop an expedited and streamlined permitting process for charging stations. So you can see here, again, I said it, I think went into effect, I think January of 2016. And you can see here in this bottom left map, in 2019, you can see the green on there. Only a very, very few cities and counties were in compliance with the legislation. And so GoBiz recognized this, there was a gap here, and decided that we could really help the state by working closely with the local jurisdictions to understand that there even was a law, right? And that we needed to be in compliance, and providing the resources and tools to help jurisdictions become streamlined under AB 1236. So, I think just really to underscore the importance of having this implementation assistance here, we were able to add, so for a couple of years, we were working on this, our team, we were able to add a dedicated permit streamlining specialist in November of 2022, and it's been very, very helpful. So since she joined the team, we've even been able to streamline nearly 50% more so have moved into streamlined, and 30% more have moved from not streamlined into being in progress for being streamlined. So essentially what being streamlined means is that you have an ordinance, that streamlining ordinance, and you are able to you have a permitting checklist that tells infrastructure providers everything that needs to be included for administrative approval, and then you go up on the map here. And I guess I would just, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail here in a second, but really just backing up a little bit, what this means for administrative approval is that if you have a complete application package for your permit and there aren't health and safety concerns, then you should get administrative approval and your entitlements will be done, and it should really, really shorten the timeline there. So this would mean it doesn't include other kinds of things like aesthetics or other types of pieces that aren't directly related in the permitting process to health and safety concerns. So GoBiz has a number of, I mentioned before, we have a number of resources on our website, the guidebook, we have fact sheets, we have FAQs, best practices, all kinds of things that we provide. So take a look there. And we also provide direct assistance. So working with the developers to understand the processes a little bit better, and also working with the local jurisdictions to understand that these laws exist and what the state might be able to do to help advance our deployment of infrastructure. And I should mention that this applies from light duty all the way through heavy duty, this process. Of course, as we get into more to heavier duty applications, as we're talking about today, projects can get more complicated, and so sometimes there are other factors. But in general, it should apply to all. And then we have AB 970, which actually adds a timeline for when the permits need to be approved. So this just takes a kind of a quick look here at how the two work together. So we have an ordinance, and you create a checklist in an online application, right? And so once that's done, the applicant should be able to submit the permit. The building official reviews it for completeness. They do initial kind of health and safety review, and for completeness, it's supposed to give just one deficiency notice. So you'll see here down the bottom, I don't know if you can see my arrow, it should be just one deficiency notice, and that's technically supposed to be turned around in 5 to 10 days, depending on how large the deployment is. If it's 25 chargers or less, it's 5 days. If it's more than 25 chargers, it's 10 days. If there is a deficiency, the application is resubmitted. It goes back to the building official, and then from that point, the permitting office has 20 to 40 days to give the approval to build. So 20 days, again, if it's 25 chargers or less, and if it's more than 25 chargers, it's 40 days. So that's how those two are kind of working together. And I also wanted to mention that we SB 1291 extends the administrative approval process to hydrogen stations as well. And this went into effect just in January of last year, of 2023. And so we do the tracking and compliance of the hydrogen streamlining as well. It's still very new, so we're reaching out to the jurisdictions, and we have some that are starting to be in process here. We have some model ordinances and checklists, which we are deploying soon. But this is really just to show that we have similar resources and are starting to kind of take the same steps as we have been for a number of years on the EV charging side of things. And again, this is for light duty through heavy duty applications. So I didn't want to take too much time here, but I did want to just put a few of the things that we're hearing common. I mean, I tried to really narrow this to permitting because, of course, there are many different areas where it affects infrastructure deployment, but it's not necessarily related to permitting. So just wanted to mention a few things that we've been hearing lately, and particularly in the medium heavy duty space. So the zoning and permit streamlining incompatibilities, we're hearing a lot right now that cities are saying that their zoning isn't compatible or doesn't allow charging or fueling infrastructure in that zone, and that 1236 then wouldn't apply to the streamlining process, and you need to get a conditional use permit, etc. It's the state's expectation, and we just want to be clear, it's the state's expectation that local jurisdictions will enable charging and fueling in all zones to the greatest extent possible. So doesn't mean that zoning doesn't matter at all, but it does mean that 1236 should be considered, and that it shouldn't be a barrier if the zone, obviously you're not going to put like a large industrial thing in a residential zone, but to the extent that it's possible, we should be doing that. We've also seen some challenges here with offsite improvements and development. So if there are other aspects of the project that are not related to the actual infrastructure itself, the charging or fueling infrastructure itself, this certainly can make the project more complex, and it can extend the permit process. It sometimes can, limit the applicability of the streamlining bill because it's adding in other pieces to a project. But these are the kinds of situations where we would really encourage both of these first two that I have on the list here to please reach out and see if there are other cities that have gone through this, other developers that have dealt with this, and if there's ways that we can help to continue to raise awareness around this. We're all kind of getting through this together as we go, and things come up all the time that people haven't necessarily anticipated. So we're here to try to help. Sometimes we hear things about aesthetics and screening, wanting different kinds of pieces of aspects, trees or other kinds of things to be included. And I think while we all want to be reasonable with what makes sense, and typically the developers are willing to work with the jurisdiction on this, sometimes there have been some pretty outrageous requests that have added, a lot of time and a lot of money to projects. And so this would typically fall outside of health and safety and shouldn't be considered for permit approval under the existing legislation that we have today in place. Another thing that we're hearing more and more about right now as concerns among the jurisdictions is the impacts of ZEV, the zero emission truck, kind of the weight. And I heard a little bit more about this earlier in terms of payloads and what does this mean in terms of weight. But what we're hearing from the jurisdictions is a little bit more around, if we permit this charging depot, what does that mean for our roads? What does it mean for safety? And so there's a real recognition now, I think Caltrans is working on this, about the data that's needed. We don't have a lot of data on, what happens to the roads other than kind of, modeling. And it's an area under active development to really understand, as we go from a few zero emission trucks to all zero emission trucks moving up and down the state and all around all the time, what is that going to mean for our infrastructure and for the safety in terms of incidents, or, what kinds of, the wall weight limits and things like that for if there were incidents. Sometimes we hear things about encroachment permits and how that slows down development, not so much the permitting side, but they're sometimes intertwined, right? So there really is an opportunity for a better process and better timing alignment between the jurisdictions, between Caltrans, between the utilities, and thinking about how we can make that more part of the process rather than kind of woven in differently for kind of each way we handle each project. And then I'll just say lastly, I'm sure like there's many more topics here, but I'll just say lastly, we hear a lot that jurisdictions have extreme staffing limitations, and it can really be a primary cause for permit delay. And so to the extent that we can, I mean, this is all the more reason why the streamlining laws matter, right? Because ideally this frees up space for other kinds of things, but we do hear this a lot. And so there are jurisdictions around the state that are technically streamlined, but they are not abiding by the AB 970 timelines. And I guess I forgot to mention with the AB 970 timelines, technically, if those timelines aren't met, the projects are considered permitted, like a developer could go forward. We haven't heard of any developer doing that yet, because I think you can imagine the potential implications of developing something and the challenges you could run into down the road with having the city as a partner or the county as a partner. So I'm sure we'll get into some more in the panel, but just wanted to give you a quick overview of some of the things that are happening in this particular piece of the permitting side. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Gia. That was really informative. And I know that Ramiro's presentation is also going to have a lot of information. So I think I might just take a beat here while everybody is digesting that and see if there were any questions specifically related to what Gia was talking about, all the small permitting agencies that you might be dealing with across the state in all of your different domicile locations. If anybody has something they must ask now before we jump into our next presentation.
Gilbert, could we get up there with the question, please? Ms. Lisa with Thomas.
So this would be for Gia. Wondering if, this is Lisa from Tom's Truck Center. We have two projects going on with SCE, and one of the locations they have described an APL certified, UL certified charger that needs an additional label on it because they don't like the self-certification of it. And so is that allowed as well, as far as when it comes to these types of scenarios? Because to me, it seems confusing, complexing, and unnecessary.
Yeah.
And it's creating a huge time delay, by the way, because they're literally requiring the OEM to go back to the vendor, to pay the vendor to get that label, which you have to go through all this testing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if the jurisdiction is claiming that there's a safety concern, but
That's
it
what they're
also needs
saying.
to be documentable, right? This is a place where the streamlining bills, if they're claiming sort of a health or safety factor, wouldn't be able to override. That said, I think it'd be great to hear more about the specifics of the project, and maybe there are ways that we could help otherwise, right? There's a lot of, as you know, a lot of this is education, and there's a lot of kind of precautionary activity that happens because we don't know. So reach out separately and maybe we can talk about some ways to go forward if that's.
Yeah, I would appreciate that, because we tried to provide education by asking for a meeting. They declined the meeting. They want it's black and white to them. You either have it or you don't.
Yeah. Well, let's
Okay.
reach out. We may be able to get a response.
Yeah, thank you. That was actually a pretty practical example of the question that I was going to ask also to you, Gia, which is I saw 2 bullet points in your presentation. One where you were talking about the timelines, right? 5 to 10 days for, and then another 10 to 15 days for another piece. I'm not sure. Did the mic just go off? I'll just talk loudly. So the question was, what is the best sort of time for a fleet or a property owner to reach out to you if they encounter maybe like the scenario you mentioned with the zoning, or God forbid, needing a conditional use permit? Whoever has had to ever go through that knows what I mean when I say it. Are those the 2 scenarios where they could maybe be interacting with your office to find answers to why they're not getting the answers they need with their local permitting agency?
Yeah, those are 2 great examples. Certainly not the only ones. I'd say if you're having a challenge, I guess I'd back up and say the key thing to understand would be engaging with the jurisdiction early on to understand what they need, right? And so ideally you would maybe know earlier that, oh, we might want a conditional use permit for this. And so before you get to that, before you've submitted the permitting package, having some dialogue with us and some resources, sometimes some of the resources we have on our website can be provided to a jurisdiction, and that's sufficient. Other times, jurisdictions will decline a meeting, and sometimes we need to reach out. So yeah, those are great examples. I would say, we tend to not want to come in if it's like, oh, this seems like it might be hard, let's get GoBiz in here, right? Work with the jurisdiction, but also if it's if there are barriers and you feel like you don't know what to do, reach out anytime, right? We can give some guidance. We have a dedicated person, which has really, really helped on this.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. With that, Ramiro, I will turn it over to you.
All right, everybody. So sorry about that. I feel so iced right now, like a kicker, but all is good. We will resume where we left off at. So once again, what have I learned in the last 2.5 years of working for the utility? First and foremost, every EV infrastructure project is a major, major endeavor. A lot of time, as you heard today, but we're going to go into it. But another thing that I've also learned at the utility is that utilities such as Southern California Edison, we have tons of programs, tons of support, tons of different channels where we can really be your trusted partner as you are making this transition to electric. But what we've also uncovered, or might say myself in particular, that the fleets also have tons of different questions, and some of them we could address today. And if you are transitioning your fleet to electric, you may be wondering, when and how should I engage my local utility? You always hear it. Engage with us early, engage with us often. What does that even mean? And today we're going to go over some of those elements and also cover, what does the EV infrastructure installation process even look like? A lot of people, panelists here before our time here, will discuss how the challenges and the timelines and those aspects. And a lot of fleets here in this room, you might be wondering, how do we even engage with Southern California Edison for our projects? Or you may be wondering the cost element. 2x, 4x, 5x, whatever that number may be for you, plus infrastructure, plus chargers, plus this, plus that. It's a lot different than buying a diesel truck, isn't it? So what resources, programs, and funding opportunities are available in the marketplace to help offset the costs of the transition? Now, the next one's interesting, and yes, I'm going to go there. Will the grid even be ready to support my electrification initiative? I know you guys were all going to ask. Got you guys. All is good there. And of course, the biggest one that my buddies here in the back that we talk to fleets every single day, you may be asking yourself, where do I even begin? Lots of thoughts, lots of strategies, lots of different conflicting information as you go from booth to booth at any event. And then you're wondering, how do I even embark on this journey? Now, this session, I really want to make this about you guys. I want to make this about you and your goals. Now, how many fleet operators are here in this room? Please raise your hand if you're a fleet operator, not a vendor. Got one fleet back here, a couple fleets back here. Hector, going to see you. Fleets back there. All right, good deal. So ultimately, what our goal is to do is figure out today where you're at in terms of fleet electrification. Where do you want to go? And it's our job as a utility to help you build a bridge as to how to get there through our various infrastructure installation programs. So this brings us to the interactive session of our event. So I'd like to get one brave volunteer. Can I get one volunteer, please? Anyone? Brave volunteer? Brave volunteer? Sir, you look like a brave volunteer. Sure. Would you mind? All right. So I'm going to ask a question, and I want you just to write down what the audience says. And I got my buddy Gilbert and Luis back here going to go around and start taking some questions. And guys, I really want to uncover, and this could be open to anybody, what keeps you up at night in terms of fleet electrification? All right, guys. So why don't we go around the room and just start blurting it out? It's fine. And my goal is to do, and so if you could please write that down, is to make sure that we answer your concerns throughout the presentation, whether it's on our end, on the CalSTART side, or on the GoBiz side, or anybody really. We got a lot of expertise here in this room, and just really make this a collaborative session for you guys. So who is my first volunteer to share with everybody here what keeps you up at night in terms of fleet electrification? Yes, sir. You know, like Luis, bam, you're fast, Luis.
Emergencies.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Emergencies.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on emergencies, please?
2011, we had a wind event. I believe there was about 10 days with no power from Pasadena to Arcadia.
Okay. So resiliency.
Yeah.
So what I hear you saying, correct or wrong, is that you want to make sure that when you plug in your EV, and I know you're for the city, right? It's a lot of different fleet compositions. You want to make sure there's power on the other end. Is that accurate? All right, so we'll get that done down. All right, so let's go on this side of the room. Mr. Hector from MLI. You got what keeps you up at night in terms of fleet electrification? We got a gentleman here in the back with the microphone for you, sir.
Good afternoon. The main thing that we're looking at is the steps that we have to comply with for the infrastructure, make sure that everything's taken care of, and also the funding for the electric vehicles.
Fundings.
Yeah,
So cost and process, it sounds like.
that's true. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, sir. So, sir, are you catching this over here? You're good? He's writing away feverishly. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And we have a fleet operator up here in the room. Miss, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and telling us what keeps you up at night in terms of fleet electrification.
So Melissa Walker, City of Moreno Valley. We actually have about 13 or 14 electric vehicles in our fleet right now. We're very much looking at cost, especially getting the infrastructure put in behind the fence. There's a lot of funding out there for public facing. We're doing a lot of that because I also have an electric utility under me. Sorry, but you are the other half of our city. So, so there is working with you also with when we go outside of our electric utility. But and then just getting people and our employees okay with driving EV. You know, we started small with one vehicle to get them used to it, and slowly have figured out the use cases, and hence built to that 13.
So it sounds like driver adoption and retention of some kinds. How is that going, out of curiosity?
Surprisingly well. So we started with a Bolt that we had our security guard around the yard test out, idle time, a lot of just driving small areas. We got a couple more Bolts that we could use, and we gave it to our code enforcement, who were insistent that they needed SUVs. They now love the Bolts, especially because they're going around giving tickets to people, so they don't really need it. Next was our trying to replace our trucks. We couldn't find trucks, so we ended up getting some Transits, which actually worked really well. We put our facilities in there. Now they don't have to unload their truck every evening with all their tools and reload it in the morning. They can close up and keep that all safe within the Transit. So they're actually loving it now. But again, it's finding that use case, thinking about it a little differently, and then, you know, testing it, getting a couple, making them use it, and getting it out there.
Thank you so much for that collaboration. All right, guys, one more. Let's go to Lisa over here. Lisa, what keeps you up at night in terms of fleet electrification? And keep like just 2 minutes, Lisa, because we know.
2 minutes? I don't have enough time. No. Honestly, I would say it's really about making sure that the fleets get this opportunity. You know, we hear so much in terms of maybe misinformation, right? That keeps me up at night because it's false, you guys. And I'd honestly say, how many times that you've talked to somebody, they've actually had a real experience in this technology. I come from the fleet side. I ran a fleet of buses for an airport operation. That fleet has been 100% electric since 2020, 2 years earlier than thought they were, because they were confident to get rid of their diesels. And so, you know, it's really about just get your butt in one of these trucks or buses and just try it out for a day. You know, I think that was a great point that you had brought up. I don't know what your name was, but I mean, you'd be shocked and you will love it. You know, you may not love it the first time or the second time, but you'll get used to it. And there's a lot of things you're going to love about it. So hopefully that makes sense.
Perfectly said, right on time. Appreciate that. All right, gentlemen, over here in the back, the food bank.
Yep.
Keeps you up at night, sir.
Tony Papsiak, Second Harvest Food Bank of Orange County. Currently, what keeps me up at night is non-compliance of regulations. So not having 30% of my fleet be ZEV currently. That's what's keeping me up at night, not having the vehicles yet. Aggressive regulations. You know, I'm supposed to, if I have 7 box trucks with reefers on it, 30% have to be ZEV currently. Is my registration going to be put on hold? So
certainly great concerns. And that would be one. Oh, we got one over here. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, One of the things that keeps me up at night right now is a lot of folks are kind of jumping into electrification, trying to figure out infrastructure. And I feel like there is a lot of bad information out there, unfortunately. And so there's a lot of folks that are maybe not installing the kind of infrastructure that's going to sustain them for the short or long term for that matter. And so I feel like some of the things that I'm already hearing is people are feeling burned about the experience. And that keeps me up because once they have that bad experience, it's really hard to sort of walk that back and, get them on the right page again to move forward. Makes it just that much harder.
Thank you so much for that insight. So bad information. So, we got a gentleman here back, Mr. Gilbert, if you wouldn't mind, right over here.
Hi, Don Dahl, American Civil Constructors. We're a specialty highway construction company. We do a lot of bridge retrofits on highways out here that have ancient bridges. They can't afford to replace them, but we are repairing them and getting more life out of them. So now we're forced to put electric vehicles in our fleet because we're a high target or high value fleet, whatever they call it. But we move a fleet out here and we'll be in this stretch for a week, and then we'll be somewhere else in California for a week. There's no charging stations out here. If we have to haul around 125 kV generators behind every truck and spew diesel in the air to charge them, it's kind of defeating the purpose.
Point well heard, sir. So I hear you saying is availability of public access infrastructure and remote job sites. Perfect. Yes, sir. Rochelle.
Yeah, just wanted to add on a couple points. You had talked about, aggressive regulations and things like that. And I think for looking at it from a fleet perspective is someone on a panel earlier had mentioned, right, not rushing into the decision and doing the due diligence, because I think one of the things that keeps fleets up at night is you see so many different charging providers. Seems like there's new ones kind of popping up year after year. And you guys as fleets, right, you want to make a decision to where the partner that you're going in with for charging infrastructure, that they're here, they're committed, and they're going to be there for the long term. So that's something that we just incorporate in our conversations and something to consider for all of you in that transition as well. Thanks.
So you're saying is finding the right partner to make the transition with. All right, guys. Well, the interest time, we could keep going all day long, but just one last one I'd like to ask before we commence. Mr. Tudor, what keeps you up at night, sir, in terms of fleet electrification?
Boy, that is a tough one. Infrastructure. I'm not gonna lie, and that keeps a lot of us up at night at work as well. And we truly talk to the utilities, we talk to the Energy Commission, and it will be there. It's coming now, but I know that people don't see it. Right? I mean, I know that you're just starting to see charging stations out there. You're starting to see services such as companies bringing hydrogen to you on site until they can get an actual hydrogen station near you. It's not that it won't be there that keeps me up. It's that it needs to get there now, and it is getting there now, but it's hard for people to believe that when they don't see it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. All right, guys. Well, thank you guys so much for the collaboration. So working with Southern California Edison for your power needs, or just utilities in general, and you hear the term, engage with the utility early, engage with us often. But what does that even mean? Really, it means that EV infrastructure installation is a major endeavor, as we already mentioned like 20 times today. But you also have to consider your utility as a partner, because there are a lot of moving steps to it. And we do need the power. And everybody here that's electrified at some point will have to go through the utility. So why not do it up front? Now, with that, we have a bunch of support mechanisms within the utility to help you transition. Doesn't matter where you're at in the process. So SCE people, please raise your hands. I always do this exercise, and yeah, we're here at our facility, so of course we have a bunch of SCE people, but typically we always go out in droves, and the reason for that is because we care, and we want to support you through the transition. So if you take anything away from that, just take those two things away. That AV infrastructure is a major endeavor, but your utility is here to assist you through the process. And that's all even before you even get to the programs. I haven't talked about programs yet. And that's what leads us to that last point right up there. Does this work? Nope, we didn't pay the bill. All right, cool. All right, so let's move into the program side of it. So yes, we do support you every step of the way. And just in that little bridge example that we shared, we want to cover where you're at, where do you want to go? And it's our job to help you build the bridge as to how to get there. And what that really means is injecting you in the right program at the right time to help you reach your electrification goals. It's never something where we just start saying, oh, charge-ready transport or Rule 29 and all that stuff. I don't even mean anything to you today. It really is uncovering what your fleet plans are. What is the short-term strategy? What is the long-term strategy? What are your route cycles? All those different elements that everybody on these panels have been talking about, and then identifying which of these programs is right for you. It might be one, it might be two, it might be all of them possibly. And those are things that we will help you uncover. Now, as we move into one of the programs that I happen to represent is what we call the low to no cost EV infrastructure installation program called Charge Ready Transport. By the raise of hands, who has heard of Charge Ready Transport? All right, so oh, we're doing our job, right? This is good. All right, and all the utilities, I know some people might be watching this and you are not in Southern California Edison service area. All the other IOUs also have a program very similar to this. But let's do a little deep dive into charging infrastructure installation program. So what Charge Ready Transport is in a nutshell, it's a $342 million program that was launched back in 2019. What the California Public Utilities Commission did is they granted us a budget of just over $342 million to electrify a total of 500 sites that represent 8,490 medium and heavy duty vehicles. And I see a bunch of people taking notes. There will be a QR code with all this information you get right on your phone. Now, out of this, there's four main elements that make up our program. The one that everybody today has been talking about is infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. We hear it all the time, right? But that early engagement is key for all this. But what we do here is we actually provide what we call that low to no cost EV infrastructure installation. In other words, we're going to do all the Edison side work from distribution up to the meter, power lines up to the meter, use a fancy word for that. And then we're going to give you 2 construction tracks on your side of the meter infrastructure. We also have charger hardware rebates of up to 50%, and there's special commercial time of use rates. In other words, your rate structure or what your new combustible expenditures will look like, which we'll dive into. And then the last one that EV advisors are, we're going to wait for that to the very end. So let's dive into it. So Charge Ready Transport, the way that it works is that for every one vehicle that's qualifying that you purchase, you're allotted one charging port as part of the process. That qualifying vehicle for us would be anything that's a class 2 all the way to a class 8. So the pickup truck, all the way to a tandem axle day cab, everything in between. It also does cover off-road assets. So if you're doing TRU infrastructure, refrigeration, gentlemen back here, it covers that. It also covers forklifts, yard tractors, etc. Now, the really cool thing about this program is that we can actually look up to your 10-year deployment cycle. So in other words, if you tell us you're buying 100 tandem axle day cabs over the next 10 years, we could technically deploy the entire infrastructure and upfront, phasing in power over time as you're phasing in vehicles over time. You might be looking at me saying, I mean, we don't even know what we're doing next year, let alone in 10 years from now. You could always customize that number. You could start off with a 2-year strategy, a 3-year, 6-year, 7-year, whatever number between 2 and 10. And then you could always reapply as long as the program is open. Now, please don't let that fool you. The program is limited to the end date of 2026, and there is a certain amount of money that's available. So take advantage of the funding while it's there. Now, the program itself will support anything that's AC level 2, all the way out to a 350 kilowatt power cabinet. So here you just have to make sure you pick a charger that is on the Edison approved product list. And there's a little link below, but once again, I'll send you guys all this information. And there's several hundred chargers that are on there. So definitely a lot of options for you to choose from. Now, with chargers, if you happen to be in any of the 3 categories on the left-hand side of your screen, so if you're a transit agency, you're a school district, or if you're a project site in a disadvantaged community by way of air quality, you would also qualify, you're not on Fortune 1000, the secondary portion to that last qualification, that you automatically receive a charging hardware rebate of up to 50%. Those rebates are from $1,700 up to $37,000 per physical charger. And the great thing about this program is that it is stackable. So for those that don't know, stacking just means you could use this program with another program like a CalStart Energize or HVIP, et cetera, or any of our other programs, and you could actually stack it to offset the max minimum potential possible. Now getting into infrastructure. So under the infrastructure elements in this particular slide, we're going to give you 2 options. Both sides of it are going to cover distribution up into the meter upgrades. I wish my little clicker was working here. But what it pretty much is, we're covering power lines all the way up to brand new meter. And in this option here, we're also going to go onto your side of the property, install the panel switchgear, run all the trenching, all the wiring, all the conduit, all the way out to the first interconnection point between the charging station and the physical infrastructure that gets decided to work. So here, the only thing you'd be responsible for is the purchase of a vehicle, the charging station, installation of the charging station. We cover everything else. Permits, design, materials, switchgear, et cetera. All that is covered through Charge Ready Transport. Guys, I'd like to pause here for 1 second. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, or comments so far? Anybody at all? Ms. Tony, any questions, concerns, comments? You're good? All right, so that is up. You good?
Regarding, yeah, when you say panel, which is on the right-hand side, right? That one, yes. Yeah, so, and on the left-hand side, it says the meter, right? Would the panel be the shut-off system?
The panel
Or
is
the
a
switch.
transfer of energy from the transformer down into your actual chargers. So that's something completely separate, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, no problem. All right, guys. So that is infrastructure option number 1. We have a question. Oh, we have a question. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry, Lisa.
I have a question. So if you can just kind of tell us where we're at, because switchgear has really been a hot topic as it relates to anybody that's doing a project in infrastructure, because you need switchgear. So can you kind of give us some feedback on how we're improving that program and what the utilities are going to do about that?
Yeah, switchgear is certainly a shortage of that. We're skipping it a little bit here in a couple of slides, but it is something that we're looking to mitigate. We're looking at getting new vendors. We're also looking at standardization whenever possible. And we're also encouraging fleets to reach out to us earlier to making sure that we mitigate any sort of delays. But it is something that we have an entire initiative dedicated just to procurement at the moment. A great point, Lisa. All right, guys. So that is SCE built infrastructure option. Now, the second option, let's say you guys want to install some what I call advanced bells and whistles. You guys want to install solar, storage. You don't want to be relying on the grid, right? You don't want to worry about power outages, et cetera. There is this option called the customer built. Under this scenario, we're still going to do the distribution to the meter upgrades. So you guys see the little mouse there. But the difference that anything on the customer side of the meter is full responsibility of the customer, utilizing IBEW unit labor. So make sure you note that down. Now, on embarking on this journey, what we would do programmatically is we would actually rebate you up to 80% of the project cost for you doing that. Now, the way that this works, it's up to 80% based on what we would have paid for had we done the SCE portion, the customer build portion of the SCE built infrastructure. That's what your up to 80% rebate is actually worth. Now, the question I always get is, why would I do one versus the other? There's really 2 main reasons why. The first one is that if you look at, for example, under the SCE built on the customer side, we're coming in further into the property, so the meets and bounds are greater. So there is an easement that is required. And I can tell you guys up front, there are no red line provisions allowed in this easement. So some customers that are easement sensitive have chosen the customer build pathway because we only go up typically up to the meter and panel. The other one is solar, storage, or any sort of V2G technology, et cetera, what we call distributed energy resources. Under the SCE built infrastructure, although more attractive, you would never be able to connect any sort of technologies to that specific meter and panel. Not to say you can't hook it up somewhere else in the building. We're just talking about that specific meter and panel that we're installing. So if you want to have the option, but not the obligation to do a DER, you would pick the customer built infrastructure pathway. Now, one of the things that these two do share is you might have noticed they have a separate meter. And what we're going to do, we're going to inject that meter with a special, what we call commercial EV only time of use rate. In other words, a rate structure. It's all based off of time. So as you see this grid on the right, the time itself from 4 to 9 is always the most expensive time of day to charge your vehicles. If you're charging today, we're still under that winter category until next week. That of 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. is a more optimal time from a cost perspective to charge your vehicles. So a lot of you in this room that are fleet operators may be wondering, well, what happens if we come in at 5 o'clock? Are we going to get dinged from that 4 to 9 p.m. range? This is where managed charging and those types of technologies really kick in to make sure that it's almost like a sprinkler system. Your vehicles come in, driver does a post-trip inspection, they plug in the EV, it's 5 o'clock, but you don't start getting charging until 9 o'clock. So that's a way that you guys can utilize that. All right, so this is your activity flow. So a lot of you might be wondering, well, how long does that take, Ramiro? If I start today, how long would my infrastructure project take and what do you need from us? Well, let's go into the what do you need from us. So for you to enter the program, we would need to know your EV acquisition plan up to a 10-year deployment. It could be 2 years, could be 4 years, up to 10. Charger selection, we need to know a site map. Make sure you guys review easements, agreements, are okay with them with no red lines. And the last element is what we call an environmental questionnaire. Now, as far as timelines are concerned, we're going to go over, before we get into that, let's go over the actual elements that could actually delay your infrastructure installation project. There's a couple of them. One of them being the type of project itself. Are we doing both sides of the meter work, or is it you're doing your side, we're doing our side? That will impact your project timeline. The specific site characteristics, other easements, other encroachments. Do we have to hand dig versus being able to utilize heavy machinery? What is the actual capacity of that site? And we have tools, by the way, that can actually help you figure that out in 5 clicks or less, actually. Permits and clearances. So I know Gia's on the line, and that's a big one. We have to get permission for everything that we do, including installing infrastructure. Materials and equipment. So I know, Lisa, you mentioned materials, and what does that look like? Those are elements that can help. And the one I really want to touch on is the customer engagement piece of it. So the fleet operators in this room, how many times have you guys bought a truck and then like halfway into it, you say, you know what, we want a different transmission, or we want to hire, a horsepower engine, and it's already in production. What ends up happening? You guys get charged for that, right? Whenever you talk to the OEM. Same concept here. Anytime there's any sort of changes at certain points, they could add time and money to a project. So things for you to consider. Now, as far as the time frame, we talk about this early engagement with the utility and how long does this all take? Well, for charge-ready transport, on average, you were looking at anywhere between 1.5 to 2 years. But that number may expand depending on the project specifics. So for example, if you're looking at sort of a circuit extension of some sort, line extensions, we call it, that's a 3+ year project. Anything that's a new substation related, those are 6 years plus. And then of course, it all depends on the actual site itself. Even within one site, you could have multiple different variances that could add the timeline. Right, so I know as you're looking at all this, you might be saying, oh, I mean, you just really confused us. So let me go back over here to this slide. So if you're at the stage of the transition and you're looking at all this saying, guys, I don't even know where to start, allow me to introduce you to our Transportation Electrification Advisory Services. The program is specifically our actual EV readiness study. A free program, you could literally have it done in less than a month. And here what we're going to do is give you a consultation with a T advisor, give you the estimated cost of diesel versus electricity, available vehicles in the marketplace. We'll go into grant funding availability, how much estimated power is to your local facility, and a whole lot of other elements. So if that is something that you are interested in, I just skipped around here, you could actually scan that link icon or get a hold of me directly, and I will make sure to get you hooked up with our TE advisors that actually be able to do that study for you. Now, this slide here, everything I just shared with you is on this link page. Please go ahead and pull your phones out, scan that. That's my direct contact information. Also, if you want to get a hold of any of the programs specifically, that are all the emails on the left-hand side. So with that, guys, I'd like to thank you for your time. I know it went way over time, but thank you, Bruce, for allowing this opportunity.
Bruce, how are we doing on time? How much time do we have left? Oh my gosh. And I'm standing in between you and lunch at this point. But I really appreciated your last slide there, Ramiro, where you were talking about sort of that first step of TE advisory. That's something that we offer also through the Cal Fleet Advisor Program. So before we break for lunch, I'll just let Brian talk about that. If you are outside of SCE territory or have domicile locations all over the state, that's another good spot to check in first. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, I really do not want to be the person standing behind anyone in lunch, so I'll keep this very quick. Please go to calfleetadvisor.org. And there's a short form you can fill out, and we'll be in touch in a day or two, and we can help you find zero emission vehicles for your fleet, help you with infrastructure, connect you to project partners, learn about regulations and all the other things that you might find kind of stumbling blocks along the way to fleet electrification. We're here to help you with a concierge-like service. It's all free, funded through the HVIP program.
Yeah, and then Ramiro had asked this great question too of like, what is it that keeps you up at night? And I will get my 2 cents in here, which is because I do work on the California HVIP program. I think one of the things that I'm thinking about, is that funding is available now for all of you making your fleet transition. However, that is not assured forever into the future, right? These types of grants and incentive programs do sunset at some time. A good hard deadline to keep in mind is that the state of California does not pay for compliance. So once you come under regulation and you have to buy these vehicles, you'll not be able to access programs like HVIP. What keeps me up at night is I wonder if all the fleets know that they have to meet these deadlines and do them early in order to get this funding. So come and talk to me. We have a table out there. The other question I think I'd just like to ask to Brian real quickly is I talk about HVIP all the time, but you and also Ramiro's technical assistance program, I think, help fleets understand the other sort of agency grants and layers that layer into this. And I'm not sure if I heard anybody summarize it yet today. So if you want to give a quick summary of kind of what else is out there for those funding and incentives for infrastructure and vehicles.
Sure. So on the infrastructure side, on the statewide level, there's the Energize program, energize with 2 I's in it.org. And that can provide a rebate program for certain, especially public use infrastructure projects. On the truck side, kind of the general advice I give fleets is often these are stackable. Pick one from local, state, and federal funds. On the state side, you have the HVIP program, which is cash on the hood for zero emission trucks at the dealership. Ramiro mentioned, maybe didn't mention, was on his slide. There's the VW Mitigation Trust, which they have a dedicated technical assistance and grant writing program for. That is a nitrous oxide reduction grant program. So you need an older truck to scrap for that one. And the other big program statewide is the Carl Moyer program, which also is a nitrous oxide reduction program that requires scrapping an older truck in order to get the funding. Finally, on the federal side, in addition to a variety of federal grants, I'd like to point out that there is a commercial clean vehicle EV credit. It's up to $40,000 per commercial clean vehicle. And there's also up to 30% in a infrastructure rebate, again, a federal tax credit. Please note, I am not a tax attorney, so please contact those kind of folks before relying on the federal tax credits. But they're reasonably easy to access, and almost any fleet can take advantage of them.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, those local air district programs very often will cover both vehicles and some of your infrastructure. So just important to be thinking about both of those. Ramiro, you had a bullet point on there about permits, and Gia got into permits. What has been your experience, I guess, with working with local agencies that sort of fall under, Gia's jurisdiction and her organization is obviously trying to get them streamlined. Has that been happening? And is there anything else we can do to sort of move things along?
Well, as you see now, with Charter Rate Transport, that does involve us pulling a lot of permits. I can tell you we have our local public affairs team, Sheriff Sean's in the room here, that has been working directly with Gia and the GoBiz team. We also have a layer, what we call our Dr. PEP, which is where you could actually get capacity information estimated at least. And there's now a permitting layer. So we actually are showcasing the entities that do have streamlining permitting process through that AB 1236. The ones that are not, right? So if you are in a site selection, that may or may not be something to consider as you're going through that process. But absolutely working with the GoBiz team to making sure that more cities are abiding by that 1236 and are streamlining the permitting process.
Yeah, may also be something to think about if you're looking at your next facility or renewing your next lease space. Speaking from my personal experience, my landlord never returned any of my requests for easements. Have you been able to get those easements done? And then when we have landlords that are not particularly cooperative, is there anything that Gia can help us with? Are landlords for you helping with your easements, or what helps that along?
Well, let's see, Gia, would you like to take that one on first?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the relationships between the landowner and the project proponent, that gets a little bit stickier. We don't have legislation that requires a landowner to speed along their easement. So it really would just be more of that coordination function of ensuring that we are helping to make it as easy as we can and working, and sharing with the the landowner kind of why it's important. That said, that lands however it does. So I think it would just be even underscores even more the importance of having a good handle on what the various pieces are, because when it really becomes an issue is when it's like, oh, we didn't realize, and you're way down the road and then everything stops because there was something that and that may happen anyway, but to the extent that we can minimize those kinds of things and having those discussions early on about needing different easements and those kinds of pieces, I think it can really help.
Yeah, on our side, we actually encourage the landlord. And so as far as the actual applicant to have a conversation with the landlord before they even enter charge rate transfer. So during the presentation, you guys seen that I did disclose the fact that there is an easement. There are no red lines. The next thing that we would do, we were on a call, we would send you a copy of the sample easement, sample agreement, and we'll even get on the call with the landlord. A lot of times they just don't know what we're even up to. Like, what are you guys even doing? And when they hear it directly from an Edison rep, it sometimes hits a little different. And sometimes they're just not willing to even entertain it. So it's something where the fleet should know that up front before even considering electrification at that site, because there's no going through, there's no easement. So that's something that could literally stop your project in its tracks.
And something you could consider in your discussion with your landlords is that this is also a benefit to them. As a fleet owner, obviously you get to fuel your vehicles at your facility, but if the landlord is looking at future rental income, having the infrastructure already available on their site will make it more valuable for future tenants.
Yeah, I think that was a point that Prologis just drove home for us for sure, right? Is that they're thinking over the long term about the utilization of that infrastructure. So, but you guys all came here to learn this today. Maybe your landlord has not. So we have to get that information to them as well.
Maybe I just add one more thing. Sorry to interrupt, Nikki. There is legislation that we have a fact sheet on our website, maybe so look there for more details, but that does kind of require a landlord to allow for the installation of charging infrastructure. Now, the cost of that would go to the tenant, and when you leave the site, if required, you need to remove the equipment as well. But there are some protections in place to kind of, if a landlord says, I'm not doing that, to say, well, you actually are kind of required to do that. So that could help a little bit, but that doesn't help with the easements piece necessarily.
Well, I think the easement piece was so great because Ramiro said one of his staff would jump on a call with your landlord if needed. So I think with that, Gia mentioned she has a specialist who's working with agencies across the state.